Could the next James Bond be black? And if not, why not? Let's have a talk about what is bound to be a completely non-controversial topic. And of course, I am here to give the most underrepresented opinion, which of course that of a middle-aged white man. Stay tuned. Hi guys, it is me. I'm making a very short video about the question of could the next James Bond be black, because it is a conversation that we are having right now. Idris Elba has once again been attached to the role, and Barbara Broccoli has even made an official statement and said that he is definitely part of the conversation. Other people have weighed in. Jordan Peterson, who is a very controversial figure now, especially coming off his podcast appearance with Joe Rogan, posted something in his Twitter feed, rolling his eyes at the idea of Idris Elba being the next the next James Bond, and as a black man. And I was kind of disappointed with that. You know, I've read Jordan Peterson's books, and they're actually quite smart, and I've seen some of his lectures, and he's a very smart guy, but then he does stuff like that, and I'm like, please, you're not nearly as smart as you think you are, mate. Anyway, Idris Elba, could he be the next James Bond? And if not, why not? Why is it that some of us might have a problem with that? That's quite an interesting question, isn't it? And sometimes when you think about it, it doesn't make you comfortable about the answers you can come up with. And to me, the only sort of really concrete argument you could make to why the next James Bond film shouldn't feature Idris Elba as James Bond is that James Bond is an actual fictional character created by Ian Fleming, who had a Scottish father and a Swiss mother, and he grew up in England, and he has blue eyes, and therefore he should be portrayed by a white guy. That's really the only solid argument you can have for why the character James Bond should not be portrayed by somebody who isn't white. And as an argument, it's kind of flimsy, I will admit, because let's think about it. You've got the literary James Bond, you know, who has a specific date of birth and fought in World War II and stuff like that. And when you have the movie portrayals of James Bond, immediately from the get-go, they are not the same character. You could mention it for superficial reasons. Sean Connery has brown eyes. James Bond has blue eyes. So, you know, that's a difference between them. If we really cared about the details of him being accurate to the book, you should only cast people with blue eyes in the role of James Bond. And that rule was broken the moment they cast Sean Connery. Other things that are more significant, like character details in You Only Live Twice, James Bond tells Miss Moneypenny that he got, I think, a first in Oriental languages from Cambridge. And that's interesting because, as far as I know, and if I'm wrong, correct me down below in the comments, James Bond does not have a first in Oriental languages from Cambridge. If I'm wrong about that, it's going to be so embarrassing. But yeah, as far as I'm aware, that is another biographical detail that is incorrect. So immediately you can see that there's wiggle room from that the movie people have got behind, and that wiggle room kind of expands as it goes on. When Sean Connery gets replaced by George Lazenby, you actually have somebody who physically resembles the literary description of James Bond much more, with his George Lazenby's beautiful blue eyes. Then they move on to Roger Moore, and Roger Moore has always been my James Bond because of the fact that he was like the Saint, and he had kind of reddish hair rather than like jet black, and he kind of had that squarish jaw. You know, if I had a couple of beers and squinted at myself, and I could kind of look a bit like Roger Moore, and I didn't feel that way about George Lazenby or Sean Connery. So I kind of saw myself in Roger Moore, and I'm a huge fan of the Saint, so like that was my period. But he was physically very different to the other two. Then we have Timothy Dalton, who practically could be the literary version of James Bond. And we've got Pierce Brosnan, who could be the literary version of James Bond. And then we have Daniel Craig. And of course, Daniel Craig, there was a huge argument about being the blonde Bond. And everyone was like, he doesn't look like James Bond. And at the core, if you take out like accusations of racism, at the core, people saying you can't have a blonde Bond weren't saying anything different to you can't have a black Bond, because you want them to be somebody who physically resembles a literary character. So you don't have to necessarily be racist to be against the idea of having a black actor play James Bond, if you are also somebody who has a problem with a blonde actor playing James Bond. But where it really, really matters is the fact that, look, let's be honest, throughout the course of the James Bond movies, there's always been a bit of leeway with just how accurate this character is. So, could you have the leeway to cast somebody of a different race as James Bond? And I think it could work. I think it could work in two different ways. There's the Idris Elba route, which I will get to. And then there's a route which could be really authentic to what James Bond is, and it could be really seamless and elegantly done, and I even have an actor picked out to pitch to you. But as I said, there are two approaches, and let's go to the Idris Elba one. So, what is James Bond, and why does James Bond have these different iterations? Why is the literary figure of James Bond represented by Sean Connery, and then morphs into George Lazenby, and then morphs into Roger Moore, and then morphs into Timothy Dalton, and then morphs into Pierce Brosnan, and then morphs into Daniel Craig? And Daniel Craig, we see on screen before he's even got his 007 license to kill, and yet we already know that the previous movies happened after that continuity-wise, because he already had his license to kill in Dr. No. And then in No Time to Die, he's hanging out with Felix Leiter, and even though they've only been in a couple of movies together, that relationship seems to span back to all of the times that he worked with Felix Leiter in all the movies in which Daniel Craig wasn't even portraying James Bond. It is a weird, messed up thing, and there are various options to try and sort that out. Well, there's only one option. Two. There is one. Okay, this big continuity mess is some kind of continuity, and the character of James Bond from Dr. No is meant to be the same character as in No Time to Die, and clearly that does not work because the narrative gets broken in several different places. The second option is the codename option, which is the idea that each James Bond, when the actor gets replaced, is a new, different person coming into the role and adopting the codename James Bond, the 007 numbers, and basically being a different agent with the same name and codename. And this rumour this theory came up when George Lazenby entered the role, because as Tracy drove off in his Aston Martin, he was like, this never happened to the other fella. And everyone's like, oh, the other fella, that must mean they're different people. However, we know that that's not true either, because when Roger Moore was cast as James Bond, there are two mentions in The Spy Who Loved Me and in For Your Eyes Only of Tracy. So clearly the James Bond represented there was at some time married to a woman called Tracy, which means they were the same person, even though they are very clearly not the same person. It's like, so the codename theory, and Calvin Dyson did a really good video breaking this down, and if I remember, I'll put a link to it down below. If not, just Google it. I'm very bad at putting links into things. Anyway, yeah, the codename theory doesn't really pan out either. But I have a new theory, and this is a definitive theory. It's called the Multiverse of Bond. Because we just saw No Time to Die, not No Time to Die, we just saw Spider-Man No Way Home, and then we saw Into the Spider-Verse, and we've got shows like Loki going on. In the MCU, there is a multiverse, and of course that's what James Bond exists in, a multiverse. There's the OG version, which is the literary version of Ian Fleming, then you have the Connery version, which is a variant Bond, a Bond from a different dimension. And then as the years go on, we start to go into a different variant Bond, George Lazenby. And then we return to that other original Sean Connery variant Bond. And then we have a different Sean Connery variant Bond who is in Never Say Never Again, because that clearly wasn't the same one who was in the other Bond books because of copyright issues. And then Roger Moore is his own variant James Bond. Timothy Dalton is his own variant James Bond. They are all the same character with the same background and loosely the same experiences. The Roger Moore variant of James Bond was married at some point to a woman called Tracy, but it was not the same Tracy or the same Bond that were featured in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. That was a different variant. It's a system that they use in CW's Arrowverse show quite well, like having these different variations of the same characters. I've been watching Star Trek Discovery, and they have the mirror universe, and of course, to make it extremely convenient, you always have evil versions of the same characters who are the main crew, because that way you can have them compare their evil and good versions. So the idea of having parallel dimensions with different variants of James Bond is the only one which makes any coherent sense to what James Bond is as a fictional character, in which case you can absolutely seamlessly, without any issue whatsoever, have a black Bond, because there just happens to be a multiverse out there in which James Bond is black. This is the Idris Elba way. This is how we should introduce Idris Elba as James Bond. Because Idris Elba fits the bill. He's bloody good. Barbara Broccoli said, James Bond could be a British man of any race. I have some different criteria. James Bond should be somebody who is super suave and charming, kind of posh and upper crust, and he could kick your butt. Like, he's badass and cool. And Idris Elba, even though he's like born in, I've got it written down, he's born in Hackney. There we go, East Ender he is. Born in Hackney, so he's from the East End of London. Roger Moore, I think, was from the East End of London. So, boom, there we go. We're practically raised in the same neighbourhood. So, even though I think it was Anthony Horowitz said that Idris Elba was a bit too rough to play Bond, I completely disagree. I think if he wanted to, he could put on, like, super upper crust. I don't think he needs to. If you saw Hobbs and Shaw, he was, like, just the right level of rough. I mean, he's like Daniel Craig level rough. That's perfect rough. Yeah, he would be a great James Bond because he could absolutely convincingly pull off all three of those things. A lot of people say he's too old. And I go, well, hang on. Idris Elba, as of now, I believe, is 49 years old. And you think that when No Time to Die was filmed, Daniel Craig was 51, I think. And then when you think when A View to a Kill was filmed, Roger Moore was 57 years old. God, I hope I'm off sleeping with blonde Californian women at 57 years old. Good for you, sir. But I digress. So listen, we have to be honest. Idris Elba, he's the right age. We can absolutely do that. He's got the acting chops. He's completely badass. In terms of like whether you could have a black James Bond, yet fits perfectly in with the multiversal theory Bond. And then let's get to execution. If you take the script of a film like Tomorrow Never Dies, it's a brilliant film, and Pierce Brosnan is wonderful in it. Tomorrow Never Dies to me is like the Stella Artois of James Bond films. Stella Artois is a very crisp, refreshing, completely inoffensive beer that does the job. I like it. I think it has a certain sweetness. And I drink a lot of lager. You have to kind of cycle your lagers like you cycle your greens. But the one I always end up coming back to is Stella Artois. It's just quite an enjoyable beer. And Tomorrow Never Dies is like that. It is like the template of a perfect, inoffensive, delicious James Bond film. David Ritsky says that Bond films like pizza, and it's like this is a really good, solid pizza. And if you take the script of Tomorrow Never Dies and you put Idris Elba into it, and don't change anything else, you just have him play the role with the same script as Pierce Brosnan did it, that would be a bloody good movie. I have to admit, that would be a bloody good movie. And you have to think there is nothing in the script which causes any issue with the fact that Idris Elba is black. It doesn't. And, even the fact that James Bond had his affair with Paris Carver and they were clearly in love. Yeah, that's absolutely fine. There's no reason Idris Elba could not play that role. And if you made the next James Bond movie in that kind of slightly light-hearted way, following such a perfectly formulated, structured script like Tomorrow Never Dies, and you had Idris Elba in it, I would very happily pay $20 and eat popcorn and watch that and think he did a fantastic job. So there we go. Idris Elba, you have my thumbs up. If you want to become the next James Bond, I am 100% behind you, and I look forward to that. Okay, though. Right. What other option is there? And there is actually another option, I think, that we should very seriously talk about, because the big issue that people who don't want somebody black to have as James Bond is that, it doesn't make much sense from a character background. He has a Scottish father, and Scotland, at least as far as I can remember, does not have a huge amount of racial diversity, especially if you're like a well-to-do Scotsman like Andrew Bond was. His mother is Monique Delacroix from Switzerland, and I've got some specific details written down about her, because that's kind of interesting. Yes, so Monique Delacroix was born in the Canton de Vaud, which is in Switzerland. It is a French-speaking canton there. And you don't have a huge amount of racial diversity in Switzerland either. Or do you, actually? It's quite an interesting one. Do you know 28% of people who live in the Canton de Vaud are not actually Swiss? They're foreign. And where could somebody with a name like Monique Delacroix come from? This is where it gets kind of interesting. So let's imagine that you make a James Bond movie that maybe has a young James Bond in it, kind of like Casino Royale style, except maybe even younger and fresher, and it's a bold new take. And what if you cast an actor like Aaron Pierre? I'm going to throw a picture of him up here. I think he's 27 years old. Yeah, let's see, Aaron Pierre, born in Brixton. Yes, another good old London lad. And he has been in TV. I noticed him in a TV show called Krypton, and he is an extremely handsome man. Yeah, I consider him, I'm a heterosexual male, but I have to say he's an extremely attractive man. And look at those eyes, those incredible blue eyes. So here's how I think you could cast somebody like that as James Bond and have it work completely seamlessly. And it's all down to the glue that holds the entire James Bond franchise together, which is, of course, Miss Moneypenny. When Miss Moneypenny was introduced, played by Naomi Harris in Skyfall, it was one of those cool like twists at the end where it's like, oh, Eve is actually Moneypenny. Yeah. If you haven't noticed, Naomi Harris is black, and she's born in Islington, but her parents are Jamaican and Trinidadian, and she grew up in a council flat in Finsbury Park, but she attended Pembroke College, Cambridge. So you know she's kind of got the same, like, she would have mixed in the same social circles as the literary Miss Moneypenny or the television movie Miss Moneypenny would have been expected to. What else have I got written to her? And she trained at the Old Vic, which is a very well established, well, it's basically like the place to go and study acting in Great Britain. So it was, nobody complained when Naomi Harris came in as Miss Moneypenny. No, I don't remember reading anything about anybody batting an eyelid about the fact that they had Miss Moneypenny played by a black woman, because why should they? What could you possibly have that? If you had Miss Moneypenny originally played by Lois Maxwell, who's Canadian of all things, which is, you know, I think to most British people that would be far more offensive than the colour of somebody's skin. Imagine casting a Canadian, and they'd be casting an American next. That would be terrible. No, but Lois Maxwell was wonderful. Everybody loved her. And then when you had other Miss Moneypenny, Samantha Bond, she's my favourite. They were British, and you could imagine Miss Moneypenny, based on the literary representation of Miss Moneypenny, would be a certain girl of a certain type, you know, born in a nice place in London like Islington, and maybe going to a nice college like Pembroke College, Cambridge. And so Naomi Harris is the perfect modern day representation of what somebody from Miss Moneypenny's background would be. And that's why nobody batted an eyelid when she was brought in as Miss Moneypenny. You know who else nobody batted an eyelid about recasting was Felix Leiter. Felix Leiter from the books is originally meant to be a blonde man from Texas, and he has been before then. There was only one time in which Felix Leiter was played by the same actor twice, and in Never Say Never Again, which wasn't part of the Eon franchise, they made a joke of the fact that he was played by a black man as opposed to a white actor, just to make fun of the fact that he was played by somebody different in every single movie. But then they brought Jeffrey Wright in, and the really interesting thing is, they make no illusion about the fact that this Felix Leiter is supposed to be the literary Felix Leiter. In fact, if you caught it, and I didn't actually catch it until I read it in an article, in No Time to Die, see, there's a line of conversation when Felix and Bond are in the bar playing that game. And, let's see, did I write that down? He goes, yeah, so Felix says, oh, it's like back when I was a kid on that shrimper. And Bond says to him, you're from Milwaukee. Because, of course, you don't have shrimping boats in Milwaukee. And Leiter says, am I? I thought I made that up. And that's kind of interesting. So, like, is this version of Felix from Milwaukee? I don't know. Is it meant to infer but the fact that he lies about his background to Bond? I don't know. But it's very clear that he is not meant to be the literary character of Felix Leiter. He's a different version of Felix Leiter, and he sticks around for multiple movies, and nobody bats an eyelid about the fact that he's played by a black guy. Jeffrey Wright, wonderful, wonderful actor. So if you can recast two very significant characters in the Bond franchise with somebody who isn't white, then you could cast somebody else in the James Bond franchise as somebody who isn't white absolutely seamlessly as well. Like there's no argument for that. So let's take one of the characters from James Bond's backgrounds, like Monique Delacroix, for example, his mother. What if Monique Delacroix wasn't Swiss, like 28% of people who live in the Canton of Vaud aren't Swiss and came from somewhere where her name would make sense. And where would a name like Monique Delacroix make sense? Well, maybe it would make sense from any of France's many colonies. Like in Africa, you've got Mauritania, Senegal, French Sudan, which is now Mali, French Guinea, which is now Guinea, you've got the Ivory Coast, you've got Burkina Faso, you've got Benin, and you've got Niger. You've got all of these different countries that have French culture and French background and French names and things like that. What if Monique Delacroix was originally from one of these countries and her family moved to Switzerland and then she met Andrew Bond and they got married, and that is how James Bond was born? And it would make sense that he would be black because his mother was black, and he would also be white because his father was white. Maybe he's got those same piercing blue eyes, and maybe you cast an actor like Aaron Pierre to play him. And that works. That absolutely works. That makes sense. That's something you could do. And then in a James Bond movie, all you need to do to cover the bases and explain that is maybe have M opening up a folder which has James Bond's background, and you've got a picture of an actor like, oh, we should have Pierce Brosnan play his father. Oh, that would be good. Wouldn't that be good? Pierce Brosnan as Andrew Bond, and then you have a black woman with a picture of her as Monique Delacroix, James Bond's mother, and then boom, job done. You don't need to mention it anywhere else in the movie. That's the establishing thing that makes it logically make sense, and then for the rest of the movie, he's just played by Aaron Pierre, who I think would do a really cool job of being James Bond, and it makes sense, and it's kind of authentic to the script, and authentic to the character, and authentic to the background of the character as he had the potential to be in our modern world, which is very different to the one that Ian Fleming created. So I think that could be a really elegant solution to the whole thing. And in a lot of ways, it makes a lot of sense in terms of the certain things about James Bond, the character we like. I mean, I always resonated with the fact that James Bond was kind of an outsider. He was an orphan, and he went to school at this very fancy school, but he kind of almost didn't feel like he had legitimacy to be there, and he was picked on for that, and that made him feel isolated. And I know that feeling of isolation, of not quite fitting in, was something that resonated with me. When I talked to David Chobachelich from License to Queer, he said the same thing. So there are always elements of James Bond that resonate with us. And if you imagine a James Bond who was born half black, growing up in the not quite upper crust of British society and going to the fancy boarding schools and stuff like that, that explains even more so why he might feel that outsiderness. And it works. It just works. It really does. And I don't think you could make much of a solid argument about why you shouldn't take that route. And the more I talk about this, the more behind it I kind of get. It's funny, when I started the idea of making this video, I was going to end up being like, well, if you want to stay true to the literary character, you can't possibly cast somebody who's not white. It was going to be one of those, I'm not racist, but the more I thought about it, the more it kind of made sense, and the more it came up with that theory of how you could do it elegantly and respectfully to the character of who James Bond is supposed to be, the more it made sense. And then the final thing I thought about it was just what it would mean, what it might mean to people. So the wonderful, wonderful thing about the James Bond community that I've been privileged enough to be part of is that you have all sorts of people from all sorts of different backgrounds who find elements in the James Bond franchise that resonate with them. We've got plenty of women who are interested in James Bond and make incredibly insightful contributions to the James Bond community because they view James Bond from a different way, not as a woman's way. One particular person, like Lady Sue Bond, Jocelyn looks at James Bond in one particular way. Then you've got somebody like Dr. Lisa Funnell who looks at James Bond in another way. We just had the wonderful James Bond book club with Elma from Just to Kill, and she sees James Bond in a different way. Every single individual person has nothing to do with the colour of their skin or their sexuality or anything like that, views James Bond in their own unique way. And the Bond community is made up of people who've come together because there are elements within James Bond that resonate with them. And there is a certain amount of power in giving those people the representation that the James Bond franchise never really did. There was that one scene in Skyfall where Silver is like rubbing James Bond's leg in a way that he intends to be kind of like sexually aggressive. And then James Bond looks at him and goes, what makes you think this is my first time? And I've got a gay friend who like literally jumped up in their seat when they saw that, because it's like, oh, James Bond's bisexual. And it's like, is he? I don't know. You can interpret Daniel Craig's words as James Bond in a variety of different ways. I mean, James Bond went to all boys boarding schools, and a little experimentation is not unknown of in those places. So there is absolutely that line could mean, oh, James Bond is bisexual. Or maybe he was not bisexual at all, he was just trying to give as good as Silver was giving him. Or, I don't know, there are different ways of interpreting that line, and each interpretation is equally valid. But when you throw in lines like that, it gives people who didn't have that direct representation in James Bond representation. It shows that they're seen. And one of the cool things is when you talk to James Bond fans, there are James Bond fans of all sorts of different colours. There are James Bond fans in India. There are James Bond fans in Asian countries. There are James Bond fans who are Asian living in America, who are black living in America. The colour of your skin has nothing to do with being a fan of James Bond or not. But if you had the approach that I spoke about of getting an actor like Aaron Pierre to play James Bond, then it would be an unspoken and well-deserved message that, you know what, the things that you see in James Bond that resonate are the things that we see in you that resonate with us as well as James Bond fans. And I don't know, the thing that I love about James Bond is that it is a big family that all comes together, and we embrace all our differences. And things like Q, when it was revealed he was setting up for a date, and it's like, oh, he'll be here soon, and it's like, oh, Q is gay. It's like, that means something to James Bond fans who have embraced a franchise that the mainstream media has traditionally said it's like racist and sexist and outdated and misogynistic and things, whereas we as fans know that that is not entirely true, or there are certain elements that when you look through in different lenses resonate with you, or there are certain things that are so charming to you you're willing to overlook the fact that they have problematic elements. I don't know. James Bond means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, and I think if you could take this approach and give an actor like Aaron Pierre the opportunity to play James Bond, I think it would work. I think it would be a brilliant building block for an exciting next chapter in the franchise, and I think it would give a lot of people the opportunity to be seen in a way in which they hadn't been seen before. So yeah, there are two approaches that you could have that I think work really, really well in casting somebody who is not white as James Bond. And if after I've given my pitch here, you still have a problem with it, well, I absolutely respect your opinion, but I think it's time that you have to think about what your problem with it is, and whether it actually comes from, like, a place of, critical authority, or whether it comes for other reasons. And I have to admit, when I first thought about this, I had to sort of think, why would I have a problem with it? And I didn't necessarily like the answers that I came up with. So yeah, it's been an interesting thing to think very hard about. And the more I've thought about it, the better I feel about the opportunity it could arise. I'm still going to be happy if it's Henry Cavill though. I mean, to be honest, I'm just happy that there is going to be more James Bond going on in the future. And I'm just happy to be part of a very diverse and very welcoming and nurturing and supportive community of fans. James Bond means something special to us. And the only thing I can say is whoever gets to play the next James Bond, we're pretty sure with Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson at the helm that it is going to be in very good hands. Anyway, it's my rant. I am going to wrap this up. It's been a 30-minute video. I doubt a single soul has been watching it. But until next time, ciao, and I will speak to you soon. I'm Roland Hume. I've sold 67,000 copies of my books. If you want to find out how I did it, I've got a link right here you can click. And otherwise, don't forget to subscribe. I've got more videos coming soon. Thank you.